Hey everyone, I want to make a video of matching course and speed. So this method is actually good for those, it's good for anybody, but it's definitely good for those people who have trouble figuring out what AOB is, so they're having trouble figuring out what target course is, and they're having trouble figuring out what the target speed is. Speed, with the information that we have in the recognition manual, of course, you can simply look up the length and do the fixed wire timing method that's outlined in the Wolfpack manual and get a speed result. I personally don't like to use the recognition manual because it's sort of, I think it's sort of a cheat because you've got perfect information about every target in the game. There are ways to go about getting the data without having to be reliant on the recognition manual. One of these is matching course and speed. This is a historical method. You see it mentioned several times in the historical U-boat logbooks. And I'll demonstrate how it worked. So what I'll do is I've got a mission built in the workshop of one ship traveling at a random course and speed every time. Okay, so I don't know the data for this ship yet. But what I'm going to do is I'm closing the range right now. Obviously it's a night engagement here. I can roughly estimate that angle on bow. Personally, I know he's heading away from me, but that angle on bow there is probably 25 to 30, but he's going away from us, so that is 150 to 155 or so. But I'm going to pretend like I don't know that, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the range right until until he fills up in kind of a round number of center radians. You can see I'm measuring his length in the scope there, and I'm going to wait till he's about 6 center radians long. Okay, and then once that's the case, we're going to turn on what we think is roughly a parallel course, and we're going to simply just take about 10 to 15 minutes or so to adjust our own course and speed such that the bearing doesn't change, and that length, the apparent length of the target, also doesn't change, meaning he's going to still be X number of center radians long in the scope. As long as the bearing stays relatively constant, the apparent length of the target won't necessarily change, meaning it's not getting any wider and it's not getting any narrower because of any change in the angle on bow. It's simply any change in its length and its size is going to be because the range is getting closer and further away. So that's something we can measure from a relative perspective just using the center radians. Okay, so right here I can see he's just a hair over 6. So we're gonna start this now, so you can see that it's just about 6 right there. Alright, so I'm on a roughly parallel course. I think I can see the bearing is falling back. I need to bump my speed down. I'll go ahead and just bump it down a couple of notches. Okay, and my goal here is, like I said, it's twofold. It's to get the bearing to stop changing, and it's to get the range, it's to get that target to still fit roughly in about 6 center radians long, right? Could be any number of center radians, just depends on what you pick. Just don't get too close, that's the key with this. This is especially useful at night because you can get closer and you can get a good large, apparently large target in your optics to do the measurement. But it's also useful during the day to use. You can use it during the day at like maximum range, because you can tell if a target is getting closer or further away when it's at maximum range, because it's going to either fade into or out of view. All right, so that's relatively simple there. But you can see I need to slow down significantly because we're gaining on him way too much. Okay, so I'm going to watch the bearing change, and I'm going to watch the range. You can see I've got the center line aligned right on his stern, and I'm watching the tip of the bow, and you can see it's well over 6 now, so we definitely need to slow down and possibly change course here, but we'll see. So How you bring about the change depends largely on what the angle on bow is to you. So in this case, it's a relatively narrow angle on bow, so speed changes are going to affect the range more and course changes are going to affect the bearing change. I've linked a slide, like a cheat slide, in the description of this video that goes through how to adjust your own course and speed to get a match. All told, this exercise should not take any more than 10 to 15 minutes. You spend the time in the beginning, it'll give you a good course and speed value. So on hard engagements where the targets zigzag, they don't generally zigzag until about 20 minutes in. So you can utilize that time after, of course, they've settled on their course and speed. After when they spawn, they're not quite on their course yet, but once they get there, you can spend 10 minutes or so doing this exercise and get a good speed and course value before they even zig, right? So that's actually a pretty helpful thing to do. So you can see I've adjusted my speed down to about 7 knots. I'm also going to, or I also have linked a slide in the description that has the EOT settings for each whole knot of speed, so you're able to see that. So that could be helpful as well. Let's see what he's doing here. I may actually adjust this to be, I'll use the reference to be 7 center radians instead of 6, just because he's now closer to the 7 mark. So let's go ahead and just see how close we are to that. So he's under 7 now, so I'm just gonna bump speed up a little bit and close the range some more. We're probably already on a pretty good match of his course, just because I was able to eyeball that AOB. But we'll verify that as time goes on here. So I've sped up a little bit. I'm gonna watch until the bow hits about the 7 mark there, and then I'm going to bump my speed down and just use maybe 1 knot increments until I can be fairly certain that that the range won't change anymore. Bump up to half speed just to keep things moving here. Yeah, I would advise against starting this right away after you spawn in, just because generally the targets tend to take a little bit to settle on their course and speed, so you really don't want to preemptively start this right away. You want to wait maybe a couple minutes for them to kind of settle down, and then you can start this exercise. One thing to note here, a lot of this is really just for, alright, that's about 7 right there. Alright, I'm gonna bump my speed down to slow speed ahead, see what that does for us. Alright, now we're gonna continue to watch 2 things. We're gonna watch how the bow does with relation to that 7 mark, and then we're also going to watch the bearing change. Alright, so the bearing is shifting backwards a little bit. I'm going to change course toward him ever so slightly to try to suppress the bearing change. And again, refer to the slide that I've linked in the description as to whether to change course or speed. Alright. So I think we're still gaining on him a little bit, but you can see that tip of the bow is protruding just almost past the 7 now, so I'm going to bump my speed down 1 knot. I'm going to go down to 9 knots. That's slow speed ahead minus 40. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's going to give me 9 knots. Alright, so you can see, we, now he's past 7 quite a bit. So we're going to bump down a little bit. We might even bump down to 8 knots. That's going to be dead slow plus 30. open up the range a little bit. The bearing really isn't changing very much, so we're going to be good on that front, which means at this angle on bow, that means that, that the course is probably pretty spot on, that we've matched this course pretty well. We just need to reduce our speed a little bit to get him to open the range a little bit more so that he gets back out to about 7 center radians long. So what I'll do then is I'll stop the video after we think we've gotten course and speed, and then in the next video, one of my other goals with this is to teach people how to set up for a 0 gyro angle, no TDC shot. It's actually very simple to do, and so we'll use that as proof of this method that our course and speed was correct, and then we'll use some vector analysis, just drawing on the map to figure out how to perform a 0 gyro shot, so a straight torpedo shot, without using the TDC. Okay, so that'll be the next video after this one is done. Alright, we're going to drop our speed down even more, just because he is not quite at 7. He's going relatively slowly. I'd almost say he's probably going about 7 knots. That's just a quick, rough estimate at this point, just based on the speed changes we've had to make. But the more time you spend with this, the better your answer will be. Yeah, because it's taking us quite a bit of time to get his range down, or get him back down to 7 center radians long. Our course back a couple degrees just to try to suppress the bearing change some more. Yeah, you can see now the bearing is hardly changing now. We are slowly getting back to 7. Might even bump us down to just to 6 knots, just to see. 1, 2, 3. And we'll see how he does here. Now if he really starts moving back. You always want to try to keep the bearing steady. So as I bump my speed down, I turn away a little bit to try to keep the bearing steady. So I don't want the angle on bow to change too much, because I don't want the apparent length to change too much based on the angle on bow. I want it to only change because of the range. Slowly getting there. What I would normally do in this situation, so I was going to say earlier, is since we're behind him and we know we need to get relatively further in front of him anyway, I would typically do the matching exercise at a 90 or close to 90 angle on bow. It's much more accurate. For one, it's easier to eyeball an AOB that's closer to 90, and 2, it's actually, mathematically, it's actually more forgiving to figure out the speed based on matching when you're at that type of an angle on bow. But in this case, since just to demonstrate, this is a good angle on bow to use to demonstrate matching course and speed just at a kind of a weird angle on bow like this, it's helpful to see. can see it's coming back down to 7. So you can see the bow is just about aligned with, or I should say the anchor right there is just about aligned with the 7 mark. So let me go ahead and bump speed up to 7 knots again. And we're going to try to hold him right at that range. See it staying pretty steady right now as I'm watching. The bearing isn't really changing hardly at all. Okay, and the range isn't changing because I'm measuring off of that where that 7 mark is in relation to the anchor there right off the bow, if that's visible. And that's really not changing very much at all. So next couple of minutes, if that just kind of stays put, then we pretty much know we've matched course and speed. Right. Likely, you know, you're going to be with this. You're going to be a couple of degrees off on course. Not going to matter by any means. Okay, the bearing is actually dropping back a little bit, which means we need to turn to a little bit, which is kind of what I expected because we increased speed. All right, so there we go. That'll further suppress it. So you can see the length, that the 7 mark is right pretty much still on the anchor, which is what we want. That's the reference point we've set for ourselves. So that's good. Now we're just going to watch the bearing change. Steady right there, pretty steady. Okay. Yep, I think this is probably pretty close right here. Let's see, we don't really see the bearing changing at all, and that anchor is at about the 7 mark, and it's holding there. Okay, so we can pretty much call this good. So what do we do now? We've matched course and speed. A couple things. Set your optics to either 0 or 180. Okay. Angle tracking to the optics you're using. In this case, AP. We've matched course and speed, right? So we've matched speed I need to go down and get. Our speed is his speed, 7.2 knots, or thereabouts. Okay. Set that in, just a hair over 7, right there. Okay. Step 3. Okay, and then our optics are at 0. Well, if we've matched course and speed, if his bearing were 0, I need to get exactly on the 0. Okay. The AOB would be 180. We'd be looking right up his stern. If you set it to 180, the angle and bow would be 0. Okay? That's all you need to do here. Now the TDC is set up. There's nothing else we need to do at this point. Okay? So we will at this point go ahead. I'm going to end the video, and I'm going to get around to a point where where I think we're going to shoot him. But before I do that, before I end it, let's tee up the next video. Matter of fact, I'll end it now, and then we can tee it up